Hello and welcome to our channel, Cheating Exposed. Today, we're revealing another story to uncover the truth behind the lies. So, let's get started. My wife, female, 32, and I, male, 27, experienced some relationship problems caused by an ex-boyfriend of hers that I believe still affects us today. For some context, we first met while studying overseas and working part-time together at the same restaurant. I'm from Australia and she is from France. After a few shifts together, we became friends and eventually started dating. I was 19 and she was 24 at the time. We dated for a little over 3 years before moving back to my home country. 2 years after moving, we decided to get married. The problem started right after my wife and I got engaged. We decided to make the obligatory social media announcement posts to share our exciting news. About a week later, I received a message request from an Instagram account I didn't recognize. Since my wife and the person followed each other, I assumed it was one of her old school friends or acquaintances. I decided to accept the request. By that time, I had already received over 100 congratulatory messages from my wife's friends and family, so I expected this to be something similar. Instead of a congratulatory message or an introduction, I was sent several screenshots of messenger chats written in French. The accompanying message read, "I should read these conversations to know how my fiancé is." Feeling uneasy but still thinking this might be a family member or friend of my wife whose English wasn't very good, I decided to translate the screenshots. I naively assumed they would contain sweet or harmless messages. Instead, they turned out to be conversations between two people. The topics included recounting intimate encounters, specific acts of intimacy they had performed, boyfriends, and derogatory comments about how inferior Asian men are to white men. I am Asian, by the way. I immediately sent a message back, asking who the conversations were between. The person replied, saying it was my new immoral wife and attached 3 videos. I was in shock. Thoughts of my wife cheating on me flooded my mind. After sitting for a while, trying to process what had just happened, I decided to watch the videos to determine if it was really my wife in them. Later that night, after my wife had fallen asleep, I decided to watch the videos, still believing there was no way the woman I had been living with for 5 years could do something like this. To my disappointment, I confirmed that all the videos were of her. The first 2 videos featured the same guy, while the third video showed a different guy. To say I was furious would be an understatement. I had literally watched the woman I wanted to spend the rest of my life with being intimate with not 1 but 2 other guys. The most painful and infuriating thing for me was seeing her act in ways she never did with me and perform certain intimate acts with these other guys that I had wanted to try, but that she had outright refused to do with me, even after 5 years of dating and a proposal. I decided I needed to confront her. Thinking she had cheated on me with a bunch of other guys, I wanted her to explain why she did it. After staying awake through the entire night and no longer able to wait, I woke her up at 6 a.m. I showed her everything that was sent to me and asked her to explain what it all meant. She immediately started hyperventilating, then began to cry. She kept repeatedly apologizing and begging me not to leave her. This went on for a good 10 minutes. After I managed to calm her down, she explained that she had never cheated on me. She said the videos were taken before we had met, and she didn't even know they existed. She also tried to reassure me that the messages were between her and her best friend, with whom she used to share everything about their lives. She explained that the things they talked about felt so far in the past that it was like a different person had written the messages. She kept repeating how deeply ashamed and regretful she felt about the things she had said in those messages. She said it was so embarrassing that she had ever acted or spoken like that. To prove she wasn't cheating, she showed me the chat history between her and her best friend. I found the exact same sections of conversations in their messages, and they were all from long before we had met. She also revealed that the guy who sent me the message on Instagram was her first boyfriend from high school in France. She said he had been very emotionally and mentally manipulative during their relationship. For her to receive any affection or praise from him, she felt pressured to do what he wanted and let him have control over her. She explained she didn't understand how he could have obtained the screenshots or videos, especially since he wasn't the one who recorded them. We eventually concluded that he had hacked into her account somehow. She added that the two guys in the videos were short-term Korean boyfriends from when she first moved overseas. To say I was relieved would be an understatement, but I couldn't shake the feeling of disgust when I looked at my wife. Over the next few months, I tried pretending that everything was okay, but I couldn't get over what I had seen. She was a completely different woman in my eyes. I know someone's past shouldn't matter, but reading those messages about how many men she had been with really bothered me deeply. We had shared our body counts with each other in the past, and I hadn't been bothered at all. She could have told me any number, and I think I would have been fine with it, as long as it was the truth. But now, knowing that not only had she lied about the number of men she had been with, but that half of those men were people I knew quite well and considered friends, it destroyed me. Eventually, I told her how I felt after she blew up at me one day for not wanting to be intimate with her. She started crying again and asked if we should cancel the wedding. I said we should consider it, but not act on anything yet, hoping the way I was feeling was just a phase and that I would eventually get over it. The last thing I wanted was for my friends and family to ask why we weren't getting married anymore and then have to explain everything that had happened. We agreed to go to couples counseling with the goal of fixing our relationship and still getting married on the date we had originally set. We found couples counseling to be very helpful. One of the best aspects of our sessions was that we could express what we were feeling and have it translated perfectly into a cohesive explanation by our counselor. After 10 sessions, we were given a list of strategies to use together to mend our relationship, and I was referred to a psychologist for private sessions, which I found to be incredibly beneficial. At this stage, things were almost back to how they were before I received the messages, but I honestly never quite felt the same or trusted my wife the way I used to. We did end up going through with the wedding, believing that my wife's past shouldn't affect my feelings toward her, and that if we broke up, it would mean her ex succeeded in his objective and had ultimately gotten what he wanted. About a year after our wedding, my wife planned a trip to France to visit her family and friends. I was supposed to go with her, but I couldn't because I had just been promoted and was only a month into the new role. While she was on her trip, I received another message on Instagram from her ex. This time, it said, "She only likes me," followed by yet another video. I opened it, and after watching a few seconds, I assumed it was just another old video taken long before we were together. Without giving it much thought, I blocked him and planned to tell my wife about the message when she got back. But somehow, I completely forgot about the whole thing. Fast forward to today, nearly 2 years into our marriage, and we're expecting our first child. During one of her obstetrician appointments, we were discussing her due date and the approximate time of conception. While sitting there, I started doing the math in my head, and something didn't add up. Based on the timeline, she would have conceived around the time she was in France visiting her family. I stayed quiet, convincing myself that I must have miscalculated. I've always been terrible at math, and I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But as the days went by, I couldn't shake a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. The memory of her ex's message resurfaced, and my insecurities got the better of me. I went back to the video he had sent and watched it carefully, searching for any clues about when it might have been taken. That's when I noticed something I couldn't ignore, a scar on her pubic area that she had gotten while waxing during our honeymoon. It confirmed my worst fear: the video had to have been filmed while we were together. After sitting with this realization for a while, I decided not to confront her. I'm not going to ask friends or family for advice or go to counseling. The fewer people who know, the better. I can't bear the shame of people finding out that my wife might be giving birth to another man's child. For now, I've decided to wait. I'll wait until the baby is born to see if it's mine before making any final decisions. First update after 1 month. After my last post, many of you criticized me for not telling my wife about the latest video. Some also suggested checking the EXIF data to see when it was created. Taking your advice, I did both. First, I examined the metadata. It showed the video was created on January 1st, 2024, at 1:18 a.m. and was sent to me on January 6th, 2024. While this made the video seem relatively recent, I also kept in mind that metadata can be edited. I decided not to rely solely on that information. Next, I sat my wife down on the couch to tell her about the video. I approached the conversation fully prepared, using a script I'd created with my therapist's guidance. My therapist advised me to avoid making accusations and to ensure that I gave her control over the situation. I planned to offer her the chance to watch the video, let her view it alone, and delete it in her presence once she was ready. I started by calmly explaining that her ex had sent me another sex tape and when I received it. Then, I explained why I hadn't told her immediately, both after receiving the video and when she returned from her trip. After giving my explanation, I asked if she wanted to see the video. She said yes. I handed her my phone, intending to leave the room so she could watch it privately. But she started the video immediately, not giving me the chance to step away. As soon as the audio began playing, I stood up and turned to leave. That's when she grabbed the leg of my pants and started profusely apologizing. Her reaction caught me off guard. I told her there was nothing to apologize for, reminding her that this was from before we met and that I should be the one apologizing for keeping it from her. But then, she asked why I was bringing it up now. I decided to be honest. I told her about my concerns regarding the due date of the baby and how the timeline didn't add up in my head. That's when she completely broke down. She clung to my hand, crying and repeating over and over, it was a mistake. I wasn't thinking straight. I was drunk. My heart sank. I knew immediately what she meant. I felt numb, but I managed to calmly tell her, you need to explain exactly what happened, or I'm leaving right now. Long story short, she cheated on me during her trip to France with her ex, the same one who had been sending me the screenshots and videos. They ended up being intimate after catching up at a New Year's Eve party they both attended. They're from a small town in central France with a population of only a few thousand. Apparently, they had run into each other at the local supermarket a few days after she arrived in her hometown. My wife and her ex were part of the same friend group and had gone to the same kindergarten, primary school, middle school, and high school, which is how they ended up at the same New Year's Eve party. She also told me her ex admitted to hacking into her Facebook account to access the videos she had shared with other exes. Although calling it hacking makes it sound sophisticated, she hadn't changed her password since high school, and he still remembered it, which gave him access to all her accounts. So incredibly careless. She begged me not to divorce her and tried bargaining with me, promising it would be the only time she'd ever cheat. She vowed to be the best wife to me, even going as far as offering for me to be intimate with other women or perform acts to make it up to me. I was disgusted. I told her I would only consider staying if she agreed to two things, letting me go through her phone messages and agreeing to a paternity test. She immediately agreed to the paternity test but hesitated about handing over her phone before eventually complying. While going through her phone, I found more evidence of her cheating on me on New Year's Day, as well as proof of another instance from her period tracker app. She uses the app to log her cycles and activity, and all I had to do was check the dates when I wasn't in the same country as her to see if anything happened. Unfortunately for her, she had been very diligent in keeping track of her personal details. By this point, I had already made up my mind. I left. Currently, I'm staying at a hotel and have plans to move into an apartment I had been trying to rent out for a while. I've spoken to both my solicitor and my wife, and we've agreed to attend the mandatory counseling sessions required for the divorce, which will begin in October. We've also agreed to get the paternity test done after the baby is born. Additionally, I arranged for my in-laws to come to Australia earlier than originally planned so they can look after their daughter. Second update 2 to 3 months later. It's been quite a while since my last post, and over the past month, many people have been asking for an update on my life, particularly about the results of the paternity test. A lot has changed since my last update, especially regarding my living arrangements with my wife. I'm happy to share that I am the father. I was with my wife in the hospital birthing suite when my son was born and stayed with her during the 5 days she was in the maternity ward. Although I was fairly sure he was mine when I first saw him, he looks like a version of me as a newborn, just with bigger eyes. We still went through with the paternity test. About a week after the swabs were taken, the results confirmed positive parentage. Before my son was born, my wife and I had been living separately, with the only interactions being her sending me daily messages wishing me well and saying good night. After my son's birth, we continued living apart, but I would visit daily to help with feeding and changing him. We still had minimal interactions, only really speaking once a week during our mandatory marriage counseling sessions required for the divorce process. We saw psychologists from 2 different clinics, but both experiences were frustrating. It felt like they were trying to gaslight me into thinking I was unreasonable for wanting to divorce my unfaithful wife. One counselor even told me I shouldn't expect a modern marriage to be completely monogamous in this day and age. The first clinic started off standard, with sessions focused on expressing our feelings, while the counselor provided prompts to facilitate discussion. But things quickly went off track when the counselor suggested we should consider bringing other people into the relationship to better understand and connect with one another. That's when I began looking for a new psychologist. The second psychologist wasn't much better. Over 2 sessions, they tried to convince me it's normal for married couples to engage with others outside of their marriage. They even implied that it would be selfish of me to let my son grow up without a father figure in the home, regardless of whether he was biologically mine. This was before the paternity test results came back. From that moment on, I decided there was no point in continuing marriage counseling. I told my wife that I'd put the divorce proceedings on hold only if she agreed to sign a postnup, which she immediately did as soon as I gave it to her. My plan is to wait a year before filing for divorce, without any restrictions or mandatory counseling, and at least now my assets are somewhat protected. Currently, I've moved back in with my wife, but we're still sleeping in separate rooms. I decided to move back in just to make it easier for me to spend time with my son and to be available to help take care of him when my wife and her parents need a break. After spending almost a month with him, I've decided that I will be physically present in my son's life and help raise him. I believe that it is my duty as his biological father to give him the best life possible, regardless of the discomfort I feel from having to interact with his mother. What I'm trying to figure out now is how this will be possible after the divorce and how it will affect his emotional and mental development. Are there other people out there who have been able to raise their children this way? If so, how are you coping with the arrangement? And thank you to all those who were concerned about my love life, but nothing is happening. I haven't thought about dating or sex since finding out about my wife's infidelity. I'm still going to get a divorce. I'm just waiting until the courts allow me to file for divorce without having to go through mandatory marriage counseling. I've also had my wife sign a postnuptial agreement to protect as much of my assets as possible when we do divorce. Well, folks, that's all. Thank you all for listening. Please like, comment, and share the video if you enjoyed it. Also, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you will be notified when we upload the next video. Take care.